Hello everyone, I'm Annabelle Daniel, the Chief Executive Officer of Women's Community Shelters, and here we are in December 2020, and I'm here to sum up the year that was. I'm not quite sure where to even begin, but what a year 2020 has been, not just for Women's Community Shelters, but for the Australian and broader communities all around. We started this year in Australia with devastating bushfires that scorched thousands of hectares of the east coast and beyond, killed wildlife, and also left a number of families homeless. And from there, we moved into the COVID pandemic, which created a whole new range of challenges, and certainly for our organisation. And when I think about what I'm most proud of in 2020, it is the way that the Women's Community Shelters Network responded to the COVID pandemic. Firstly, by being so ready to do everything we could to keep the women and children in our care completely safe. We had our plans ready 2 weeks in advance of most of other services in the sector. And the commitment from our shelter network boards and staff was extraordinary. The first thing they were asking was, what can we do to make this work? And certainly what we saw in the first few weeks of the pandemic was a 30% increase in calls to our hotlines. And those were with queries like, I know things are going to get bad during lockdown. Will your services be there to help me if I need them? And then once we got into those months of April and May in New South Wales, what we found was that it was eerily a bit quiet and our capacity in shelters went down a bit. And we knew that there were women and children out there who really needed our help. And so we effectively pivoted our entire business model to meeting women and children where they were and providing outreach support to them in the community. And those were women who hadn't even made the decision to leave yet in some circumstances, but they absolutely needed the support, and we could only get in touch with them in certain hours. And of course, we continued to run our shelters and provide support in our network in a completely COVID safe way. And I am so glad to say that at the end of 2020, we remain, fingers crossed and all wood touched, completely COVID free across our network. It would have been enough for the network to just get by, to bring in the fundraising that we need, and to continue to do our awesome job with women and children this year whilst remaining COVID free. But what I've also been so incredibly proud of is that the network has gone beyond that. We not only pivoted our service delivery to be able to rehouse women safely into their own homes and continue to provide outreach support, but we opened our Mossman House, transitional housing for up to 18 older women, several of whom will be celebrating their first Christmas in a new home, and huge thanks to our partners for working with us on that. We also continued to work on our 2 new shelters in southwestern Sydney, and I'd like to thank and congratulate our boards and partners in those locations for continuing to maintain their commitment even during really difficult times. COVID raised a number of challenges in ways that we couldn't even imagine when we started this year, and I think it says a lot about the dedication of our communities to keep going in those circumstances. I'd like to say a huge thank you to our funders, donors and supporters who took the time to understand what we really needed this year and to be so aware of the impact of domestic and family violence on women and kids during the pandemic. I was actually really heartened to see and comment on so many media articles on this issue during the pandemic, and the concern of the community around women who couldn't access services or might be living in abusive relationships was actually really heartening, and for me it signals a shift in our understanding. So huge thanks to our donors and funders for continuing to commit to doing what we do and to helping us do more of that, particularly in difficult times. Women's community shelters still continue to grow during 2020, and we were really pleased to add 3 new board members to our group this year. Betty Ivanov, Terence Kwan and Daniel Martin joined our board this year. And we also welcomed the first male employee of WCS, Jack Ellis, who's going to be assisting as our education officer with the Walk the Talk program, which we're so proud of and which will reboot bigger and better than ever in 2021. And congratulations to Danielle Miller, our Director of Education and Special Projects, who reconfigured Walk the Talk to Chores for a Cause this year, which was an online way of fundraising and doing good deeds that students could participate in during the pandemic and while those restrictions were still happening. And of course, my biggest thanks to the WCS Hub team, who've been absolutely extraordinary through all of this. What they've had to do was what a lot of workplaces have had to do. We had to figure out working from home in those weeks in March, and everybody has just completely risen to the challenge and brought their A game to what we've needed to do this year, and that has been absolutely wonderful. So enormous thanks to my hub team, and thank you also to the board for working through extraordinary circumstances and a very difficult time, and of course my thanks to all shelter boards who've put in many hours as volunteers this year to make sure that our shelter network can continue to support vulnerable women and kids. So thank you to everyone. Have a wonderful festive season, and may 2021 bring a brighter year for all of us.